Here you are.
Here I am. Let's do this thing. Cut the music. Boom. Okay. Am I live?
You're alive.
Awesome.
Crushing it.
Good evening. It's another Tuesday night, and that means it's time for Gallowclass, where we're just going to talk about writing. I'm going to ramble on for a couple of minutes to see if a few more people are being fashionably late to the stream. Welcome to those few of you who decided to spend some time with me this evening. Thank you very much for tuning in. Again, we've got this point system that we can play around with, and I'm interested to know what you guys would like as a reward for the reward system. What things I can give to you that you can spend points on. I mean, these virtual things that really are just virtual things and don't mean anything. What can I give to you for turning them into me? I mean, it's the ultimate, like, I don't know. I'm just kind of babbling at this point. So let me know what you guys are interested in these virtual points and getting that I can give to you. All right. Let's see. There was something else I was going to talk about. Oh, yes. From now on, starting in March, February was a little wonky because of the length of the month and also events that I was doing. Starting in March, until we get a little bit more viewership, we're going to go the second and fourth Tuesday. Second and fourth Tuesday of every month is going to be the Gallowclass. If you go to the Gallowclass website or the Gallowclass page on my website, it even gives the topics of everything that I'm doing. And I've got in Sacramento in March 9th and April 6th, I have a couple of workshops. That's also on the Gallowclass page on the website. In Sacramento, aboard the Delta King in the theater, I will be doing a workshop in between my shows, my Bard for Life shows. All right, so tonight we're going to be talking about earning it. In my Bachelor of Arts, one of my favorite teachers said, "You can do anything in fiction as long as you earn it." And the reason I want to talk about this is because this last weekend I was at the Life, the Universe, and Everything Symposium in Utah. And I was on a couple different panels, and I listened to people talking about writing in the halls, in the dealer's room, in the bar at after hours. And I kept hearing all this advice and people talking about, if you want to do something, do this. In fact, I was on one panel, and I felt really kind of bad because there was one woman on the panel, I won't mention her name, and she kept saying stuff. And every time she said something about writing and about the subject that we're talking about, it was like, in order to make this work, do this. And I felt really kind of bad because I felt like the, well, actually guy, but because everything that she was saying was like, she was voicing it as that was the way to do it, I felt was doing a disservice to the people in the audience, because there's never any one way to do something in writing. And in fact, sometimes in order to do something well in writing, you have to break some of the rules of writing. And I'm going to kind of cover overlap with what I've been talking about the last couple of weeks, between both rigorous study and rigorous reading. And of course, as always, while I'm going, if you guys have any questions, feel free to pop those up in the chat channel, and hopefully there'll be an awesome question and we can go in some direction that I never even imagined when I started this. So, one of the things that, hold on, let me really think about this before I say it. One of the dangers in writing is we get in these patterns, and not just what we're writing, but how we approach writing, and not just any specific project, but over the course of our careers. and we get set in our ways. And that doesn't just apply to writing. That applies to anything that we do. We go, okay, I got this. I'm comfortable, and here I am this is my lane. I'm staying in my lane, and we wanna and we start getting uncomfortable when people suggest something outside of our lane, and like, for example, people will tell you never change tense or perspective in your writing. If you do, you have to make some sort of a break to really indicate what's going on. However, I can point to, now we can't do this, at least I can't do it, and probably you guys watching can't do it yet in your writing, but Sula, Toni Morrison's Sula. About 3/4 of the way through that book, no line breaks, no nothing. For about most of the book is in third person, distant. And I can't remember what tense it is. I think it's past tense, and I don't know if she switches tenses, but she definitely switches perspectives, because for about 2/3 of a page, when you're hitting about the 3/4 mark in that book, it switches immediately to first person. And then it switches back, pretty much no line breaks, no nothing, to third person again. Now, Toni Morrison can get away with that because she's Toni Morrison and she's brilliant. Okay? The book Middlesex by Jeffrey Eugenides, I call it, it's told in first person omniscient, because the main character, the first major chunk of the book, probably the first 2/3 of that book are told from the narrator's perspective, but recounting events before the narrator was born in an omniscient voice. The narrator, is born in the book. Whoa. Yeah, it's true. No, leave yourself up there, Cody. We'll have a chat about this. So basically, Middlesex is about a hermaphrodite figuring out his place in the world. Okay.
Follows.
When he was born, everybody thought he was a girl.
Okay.
Because his boy parts aren't traditional boy parts, and because of stuff that happens.
Right.
But so what happens is as he grows from being a girl socially to figuring out, oh wait, no, I'm actually identify as male, even though the parts aren't quite right. And so what the first big chunk of the book is him figuring out through his ancestry, from his grandparents to his parents, and all the weird interrelationships there. Right. So, and normally that kind of thing, people would say, no, I'm not going to publish that, or you can't do that, or right?
Sure, yeah, it's out there.
Right. So, but he does it so carefully and so brilliantly, and it's one of the great. It won a Pulitzer. So, but he opens up with all the things that the narrator opens up with all the things that he does before he was 16, which is when there was that transition, the transition, figuring out that he identified male rather than female. But all these things. And it's a brilliant list of, oh my God, and then he starts talking about his past.
Oh, okay.
And not just his past, but his family's past. All right. So those are a couple examples of rules that we can break. And like, for the longest time in genre circles, okay, you can go away now. And for the longest time in genre circles, second person, you wouldn't dare, nobody would look at a book in second person. And yet, N.K. Jemisin, her Obelisk series, or the Obelisk series, or I think it's the Broken Earth, Broken Earth, fifth season, Obelisk Gate, and Stone Sky. Large chunks of that are told in second person, and they're told deliberately in second person with a specific purpose within the narrative, and it works. And it works because she's doing it intentionally, consciously, with understanding the craft of what she's doing and how she's doing it. Just like Jeffrey Gennades is just like Toni Morrison does. And so, and that's the thing, is that when people say this is the rule, usually they're right most of the time. But just like jazz musicians, they do these really, and that's why I'm a writer and not a musician, but they do these crazy random riffs of music going all over the place. But they do that because they study scales and they practice their scales, and they work and they work on the understanding of the basic foundation of their musicality and their instrumentality before they start doing that. And the danger is there's two opposite perspectives. And me coming from being both a genre writer and an academic, in both of those worlds, I see both ends of the spectrum. You have on the genre side, you have rules. You've got to follow the rules, the publication rules. You got da. On the other side, you've got the literary academic side, that they're all, we've got to experiment, we've got to get away from the rules. But especially in my undergrad, I saw so many people trying to do really weird experimental stuff without really understanding, and they were doing it because they wanted to do it, and they wanted to try it but when I would ask them, okay, why are you doing this? How does this serve your story? How does this thing that you're doing really help the reader experience what's going on? And they couldn't articulate that. When I do something, anytime I do something weird, and as I'm going through, so like in my thesis, I have sections that are told in third person present tense from the perspective of inanimate objects. Because, well, one, I had a buddy of mine in one of his workshops said, you can't ever write in third person. And I said, oh yeah, watch me. That's the other thing, is whenever somebody tells me I can't do something in writing, I immediately try to think of some way that I can. Because of course I want to. But whenever that happens, like when this guy said you can't write in future tense, and I said, oh, watch me. I said, okay, so what do I want? How do I want this? What am I working towards? So in my thesis, when I was writing from the third person perspective of an object in future tense, I was looking at, okay, I'm following an inanimate object through time. One was a piece of paper that got drawn on and then ripped and then cast aside, and it got a rip, and this sort of fairy creature thing came out of it. But I chose future tense because I wanted it to be so different, not to be confused with a living creature. The other one that I did is, and that was just in the course of a single day. The other inanimate object I wrote about, and I had a couple other ones that I didn't quite get to in my thesis, but when I go back to that and write it as an actual novel, or complete the actual novel, I'll put those in. But the other one was from the perspective of a rolling pin being handed down through generations, starting at the beginning of the last century, or the 20th century. And so, but I want going through until the current day and within the story, which takes place in the current day 21st century. but I wanted to have, but even that is still told in or future tense, because I want the reader to have kind of a jarring experience of following this through time. Each of those objects, even though we're talking about things that happened in the past, but telling them as if they're going to happen in the future. And because I was talking about and having the reader follow inanimate objects, I wanted that to be such a jarring experience. And I actually read part of one of those at my graduation read, and several of the teachers who hadn't read my thesis came up to me and said, "That was so trippy. That was really neat and interesting." And so I guess I pulled it off. We'll see if when a publisher decides to pick it up, how thoroughly they decide to shred that, and I will fight tooth and nail to keep it. So anyway, but because I understand the foundation of narrative, arcs within a smaller piece, and sentence structure, and all the basic foundations, I can play with that and pull it off, because I know I know what's commonly accepted, but sometimes you don't want what's commonly accepted to tell a more interesting story. And so anytime somebody says, "This is the way," go, "But is it always?" Because it isn't always. But when you run into those moments where you say, "Okay, I'm really going to try something different here," because as we said, anytime you do anything in fiction, you can do anything you want in fiction, you just got to earn it. Part of earning it is knowing what you're breaking and why you're breaking it. And the way you do that is through rigorous study, as we talked about in 2 lessons ago, and then reading excellent works that break the rules and break them well, and to be able to articulate why that's working. And that's the big thing, earning it, because there are no absolutes. Anyway, so I think that's pretty much. I'm done with the main part of this episode of Gallowclass. If you guys have any, I'll hang out for a second, minute or so, somewhere in there. If you guys have any questions, pop them up in the chat channel, and I will more than happily answer them as thoroughly as I possibly can. We have a few more people watching tonight at this point than we did at the beginning. So again, we've got a point system that we want to give you guys rewards for, and so let me know. You can either message me on social media or message me on my Twitch, and let me know what kind of cool things that I can offer for you guys to exchange points for on the Gallowclass page on my website.
Put in there right now.
Yeah, which Cody, my producer, is going to put in there. I've got a couple of workshops coming up. The next 4 episodes of the Gallowclass here on the Twitch. The subjects will be out there. Of course, always subject to change based on my whim and what I want to do. I also have in Sacramento coming up March 9th, April 6th, a couple of live Gallowclass workshops at the Delta King Theater. The first one is going to talk about story structure, and we're going to explore one of the various ways in which we can approach structure of a story, and then how to modify it to fit the needs of our individual stories. The other one, that's going to be March 9th. The other one is going to be April 6th, and that's going to be talking about utilizing color to greater effect in our prose. All right, so that's what's going on. And let's see. Oh, Auntie Cleo, thank you very much for the subscription, for subscribing to my Twitch channel. I appreciate that. Auntie, I know who that is, Auntie Cleo.
Good old Auntie Cleo.
Yeah. As we get closer, I will try and also set something up. Oh.
iJuggler. How do you decide between some of the basic ways of telling a story? What drives you towards third person, past, or first person, present, or whatever?
That okay, that's a great question. Heck, that might be an entire episode just on its own. But I will try. Well, I'm gonna think about this. Um, okay. First of all, just my natural inclination as a storyteller, uh, especially in writing, is I tend to avoid present tense. He said, comma, having just written a story where large chunks of it are in present tense. Uh, Again, there are no absolutes, but I just naturally past tense is where my brain works. Partially, I think because that's at the stage of life I'm in and the type of fiction I read, I'm more of an adult writer. And so adult fiction tends to look backwards. YA fiction tends to be more present tense because it's more, YA fiction, young adults are more internalized. Adults are more outward, looking out. And that indicates more of a past tense because there's a lot of reflection of all this stuff that's happened. How did I get here? What did I do? I really don't want to look ahead because that's just depressing. No, but YA and in some cases middle grade, the present tense works better for that because of the nature of the audience. So, but then again, my works directed to younger audiences tend to be also in between Halloween Jack and the Dragon Bone Flute stories. Those are also past tense. But so that's kind of, it's like, really, what do you how do you want the reader to identify with what's going on in the narrative? They each present challenges. I don't think that I read a whole lot of present tense stories that are satisfying to me because too often they have too much introspection and reflection for being present tense. Yeah, a lot of present tense stories I read should be should be past tense, but they're just not because it's kind of a fad. Especially with Hunger Games being present tense and everything like that. Okay, so first and third. Oh, first and third. Really, it has to do with when I choose between a first person or a third person, it's how many different voices am I going to have telling the story? If I'm Now you can have multiple first person narrators in a story. You just have to be very careful about how you frame that. For example, in one of the projects that I started in grad school, A City on the Edge of Rebellion, there's quite a few first person narrations. That entire series of books that I have about 20,000 words written on the first one is told. It's epistolary story. It's told in journal entries, letters, missives. There's a big bureaucratic government, and so there's like little notes going on, and there are a couple of things from like newspapers and stuff in the culture that are third person, but most of it's first person, either reflecting on somebody's day or a correspondence between two people. And that's just one of the ways that you can frame first person narration with multiple first person narrators. For the most part, with a first person narration, is if you have one narrator and you really want the readers to be riding shotgun with the narrator, that character, through the whole book. Third person is, it gives you freedom, and we talk about third person omniscient and third person limited and third person close and third person distant, and it's tricky to be able to work all those different things together. Really, essentially, they're all the same perspective, but you have to realize when you're doing the distance, whether it's close or distant, and why you're doing it. And so third person allows for especially in genre fiction, adult genre fiction, it allows for greater world building and a greater scope of what's going on around, because you can then draw in the world's mythology, even if the character doesn't know about it. Or you can also, if your narrator or your characters are going to go wander off like a huge Game of Thrones or Wheel of Time thing, then you can give the reader the perspective of the various characters as they spread throughout your world. But yeah, I think we may have to do this as an entire episode where I can just sit down beforehand and think about, okay, what all do I have to say on this subject? So thank you very much. We'll be doing that at some point in the future. Any other questions? Because that was a good one. And I love great questions because it makes me think, really rethink what I know about fiction. And I love nerding out about it. All right, we're going to give it like 1 minute. And if we don't have anything awesome. And so, see if I have anything more to say about that. I'll just wrap up by saying, when your question is what drives you, how do I decide? It's basically what I'm trying to do with each individual story. The story is always, for me, the story is always the boss. And each story, whether you want to think of it's my subconscious talking through me or the story itself kind of taking possession of my imagination, each story is trying to tell something, is trying to talk about something. And so all of my craft choices, whether it's the perspective, whether it's the point of view, which character I'm going to follow through the story, that's all based on what I think the story is trying to say. And that other people have, other writers have other perspectives and other ways that they think about or decide what options they're going to use. That's for me. Story's the boss. All right. Well, thank you guys very much for hanging out. I appreciate it. And we'll be back again, moving forward from now, the second and fourth Tuesday of every month here on my Twitch channel at 7 p.m. Pacific. Until I see you guys next time, remember, the writing game is a marathon, not a sprint.